Hey, it's Chad Miles, host of Level Deeper, and that's what this show is. This is a Level Deeper podcast, and welcome in to another episode. My friend, I hope you have your thinking caps ready, because what you're about to hear is a very insightful conversation that I had with Mitchell Martin, and it made me think, and it's going to make you think too. I was introduced to Mitchell by friend of the show, Miles Santo. If you haven't listened to my conversation that I had with Miles, I highly encourage you to check that out. You don't have to before this episode, but afterward would be great. Anyway, Miles had sent me a text, and as he was introducing me to Mitchell, he said, Chad, here's Mitchell. He is a former chiropractor from Tennessee and now lives with his wife in Puerto Rico and is a men's coach. And as you can imagine, that got my gears flowing. That got the curiosity going. Well, that resulted in Mitchell and I connecting within the last week, and we had a great conversation. In particular, we talked a lot about light, and it was interesting, on both sides. We talked about how to use light to your advantage in life, how to tap into some of the primal nature and experience the benefits that light can bring us. On the flip side of things, we also talked about how to limit the negative side effects of light, specifically blue light that we're exposed to from our screens, like our phones and computers, and some of the physical and mental and psychological side effects of that light that I wasn't aware of, and you might not be either. The other part of this conversation that I really liked was when we were talking about this idea of bringing more ease into our lives, of essentially making life easier. And my question to Mitchell was, well, how do we do that? How do we make life easier? And his response was essentially that I was asking the wrong question. You have to stick around to hear more of that answer and much more from Mitchell Martin. Again, get your thinking caps ready. This one's going to make you think. It's all ahead on A Level Deeper. It's been fun, and we were chatting about like the ability to develop relationships online or virtually. It has been amazing to me that I can connect with someone for 5 minutes and then virtually, having never met before, and then it's just kind of like, all right, so tell me your life story and tell me some of the things that you're trying to figure out about life. But it happens. It works, and it's been pretty consistent that we can still connect on a very deep level even though we're virtual, which in some ways has been kind of surprising.
I know. Something to that. I don't know what that is. I think about that every time I have a Zoom call, and I work primarily over Zoom. I'm like, man, what is this? I haven't gotten an answer yet. I don't know.
As far as do you feel like it works for the kind of work that you are doing?
I feel like it's prime. I feel like it works. It's more beneficial than meeting in person, honestly, because I feel like it allows this veil to be cut through, because it's like you're with them, but you're not, it just cuts out all the bullshit for me. At least that's been my experience. Where when you're in someone's field, you feel a lot. So it might allow you to kind of shut down a little bit, at least some, especially for men, because the men don't really like to feel, whereas they're safe in their home and they're in their environment. And they're also like dealing with a lot of like psyche top down reprogramming or repatterning, or, a dump, if you say. So they're able to like be in their body, but also go through the hard wiring stuff at the same time. So maybe it's that. Maybe I just answered my own question. But I'm a big outward processor. So my wife hates that sometimes because she thinks I'm so serious. She's like, do you want me to do it now? I'm like, no, I'm just like processing out loud just so I can like get it out of here and like get into here,
Tell me more about that, because I would consider myself to be the same in that. It's funny. I mean, I consider myself an outward processor. I spend so much time thinking, and I need to verbalize it. It's why things like therapy have been powerful for me as tools or coaching, because I just need to talk about it and get it out. But yet I find it's not my natural tendency to do that. I'm not someone that's just going to like sit down and like, hey, let me just start telling you about my day and these things. I've got to have like this very defined, I don't know, space or environment for it. What is your experience been with, being an outward processor? How does that sort of show up in your life?
Well, for me, I like to hear it. I like to engage in the senses and to hear how it sounds. And then when I hear how it sounds, then I get a body response. And I'm like, I'm glad that I said that out loud before I acted upon it, because now that's a no within my body. So it's like always coming back to the body, because we have an inner authority that is all within us, and everybody has a different space from where you feel that. So for me, it's this aspect of my gut. For a lot of men, it's the gut, because that's where our power is, in our loins and our seed. So I say it out loud, and I'm like, man, I'm so glad that I do that, because as far as my life, I used to not do that. I was so introverted, and I held everything in, and I was just angry because I had nowhere to go. Whereas what it sounds like for you is like, you need it to be called upon. You need to respond. You need to have it for someone to, you don't just lead it. You wait until you're called upon to really come out and be like, oh, okay. Well, I'm glad thanks that we had this little exchange here. So that was like and that's probably some sort of where your strategy and how you choose to act and show up in the world. You respond, which that's a lot of men. So a lot of us men are generators or some sort of aspect of that. So we wait to respond.
Mm-hmm. What's the downside to that?
You get in your head and you try to lead in a way that is incongruent with your design. So you then end up forcing things and create more constriction, create seriousness. It's like, have you ever gone surfing? You ever been surfing before?
I have not, but I just saw I think on your Instagram story, I saw a picture of a surfboard, and I feel like I had talked to someone who had moved to Costa Rica, and he took up surfing too. And I just feel like that is a typical thing. Anyway, long way of saying no, never surfed.
So I grew up a skateboarder my whole life. I still skate. It's a great way to meet fear, a great way to live life on the edge. And where surfing is all out of your control. It teaches you about neutrality. It teaches you about waiting for the right moment and timing. So if you try to catch a wave too soon, then you are going to get caught in the set. So you get caught in the middle of where a wave is actually on its peak, and then you have to just take it. You have to just take it. So you try to hold your board the best you can, or you go upside down, and then get back up on your board as soon as you can. And then before you know it, another one's on you. So you have to find the path of least resistance, because that's the way water flows. So when you choose to go against your strategy of waiting and responding, that's what you do. You get caught in the set and you get hit after. And most of the time, women or your wife or partner is like just watching you the whole time. Like, what is he doing? I don't know. So it's choosing to, learn the lessons over and over and over again the hard way, which we've been programmed to do, because there's honor in that. In actuality, things can be quite easy. Things can be flowy. Things can be challenging in a different way that's allowing you to grow rather than regress, if that makes sense.
Hey, it's Chad here, and this is an ad for this show. I want to personally say thanks for tuning in to the podcast. Whether this is your first episode or you've been here for a while, it means a lot that you're here. I'm not asking you for money. Actually, I'm asking for you to take a small action to help grow the show. More specifically, there's 3 things you can do to help grow the show and spread meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here. First is to leave a rating or review for the show on the platform that you're listening on. It takes about 10 seconds and can make a big difference. Number 2 is to subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you're listening on, just so that you make sure you get notified of each episode that's published. Lastly, number 3 is to share the episode. Whether you send a text to a friend, talk about the episode at your next book club, or make a post on social media, sharing goes a long way to help. So thanks again for listening, and thanks in advance for taking a small action to help the show. Okay, back to the episode. Yeah, I mean, you talk about things can be easy. That was one of the things that I was interested in talking to you about, is how do we get there? What does the process look like? Or when you say things can be easy, I mean, what does that actually mean or look like? And I want to see, how can we break down getting there? Because I think at times for myself in my life, and for a lot of people who might be listening to this conversation, a lot of people don't describe their life using adjectives like, oh yeah, it's easy, and I have ease, and I have flow. And I don't think those are the typical, especially for men, the words that we're going to use. So
Absolutely not. Yeah.
How are
That's
we
a
getting
great
there?
question. How are we getting there? That's the number one question that everyone asks about everything is, oh, let me ask the how. Like, for example, you tell your mom or your dad that you're going to go do something and they're like, well, how are you going to, how are you going to, how are you
Yeah.
going to, right? And what does it do? It kind of like, oh, like, come on, just be happy for me, where here in this aspect, it's, can you change the way in which you look at it? So the how is already solved. The how's already done if you think about it. So if you whatever your stance is, for me, I believe in the creation. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I'm not like a devout Christian in that sense. However, I believe in life and I believe in death and I believe that there's this beautiful art to this and it involves the creation story. So when I say not a Christian, I mean like a Western church Christian. That's the environment that I grew up in. I am I really um I really respect nature in this aspect too, because it has all to do with nature. Where when you actually accept life for what it really is, it takes the how out of it. When you accept things for how they are, you accept that life has a design and you can resign as the designer. This is a big concept that it takes away the how and you can focus on the what. We're men are love details. You can focus on the what and the why. So why do I express the way that I do? And what do I need to do to change that? Not how can I change, because how invokes really this aspect of victim consciousness, because there's no resolution there. It's just like, how? I don't know. How? I don't know. Where it's like, well, my mentor told me, because that's all I would say. Well, I don't know how to do it. And then like, I think of my daughter, for example, she's like, I can't. I'm like, look, you just did. You can, where my mentor was like, well, what would you do if you did know? So she said, I'm like, shit, I didn't think of that. I didn't get that far, So, and it changed my perspective of a lot of men, right? We're big visual learners. So we like to see things. So if you start to play life into how you actually do things, like start to write things down, start to get clear on your why, start to get clear on what you need to do to get where you want to go. Then if you think about it, the how is all of that. It's just embedded in all of that, right? And that's what when God created the universe, when God created everything, he said, and it was good. That means that everything just is. It's perfect. And you can either get in line with that or you can continue to learn the hard lessons. Because for me, there's no right or wrong. It's just lessons on either side of the spectrum. And the magnitude of the lesson depends on how many times you want to learn it. So that goes with the duality, yin and yang, light, dark, inhale, exhale. Life is just this duality. And the how is just like the spiral within that. It's like there's nothing, you don't get any answers, because I told my mom I was going to chiropractic school and she was like, well, how are you going to pay for that? And I was like, I have no idea. I don't know. But when I get there, I'll let you know, because I don't know. Or, like, well, how are you going to yada, yada. And from their perspective, they think that they're asking that question to like prepare you. And I'm like, there's some things in life you just can't prepare for because they're already done. And that's kind of how I've really viewed life all, like, as long as I can remember. I never had the words to say it that way, but I've always had that feeling of there's this essence of just being able to be, and not in a passive way that gets really meshed. Just be means to be passive. No, it does not. It means to observe and know when to act at the right time, right place, right sound, right smell, right feeling, all engaged to just act.
So that was
a lot.
Take me back to, you're making this decision to go to chiropractic school, and you've got family being like, okay, how are you going to do it? And your answer is, I'm not really sure. I'm going to figure that out. I mean, is that how you had been making decisions up to that point in your life? Was that something that was common, or? How
I made decisions in my life were always based upon my gut. I always followed my gut in some sort of capacity. Um, Not a great planner. Now I'm much better. Because I come from a life of outward seeking to where I always wanted more, 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 more. Because I grew up in a house with, we didn't have a lot of money. We were very stressful all the time. My dad was big in pornography, didn't have a big emotional aspect of a dad, very angry, very shameful. So I had this big connection with my mom, where I also loved and hated my mom, which is a big part of the Oedipus complex. That's a part of Carl Jung's work of the mama's boy. That was me. That was me. And so in that, I developed the capacity to feel and be empathetic and have a better spiritual sense about life. And I missed out on a lot of what it means to be a man. So I developed a very feminine life. And I was also really angry. And so getting back to how I make decisions, I would always make decisions following that inner gut authority that my mom blessed me with and gave me that gift. And so I would just get a feeling. And I remember being in undergrad, I just had a conversation about chiropractic school. And I was like, my friend was like, yeah, I'm going to this school. It's called Life. And I was like, my whole being just like lit up. I was like, Life? That sounds cool. I'm going to look into that. So I looked into it and I was like, dude, this is great. And the girl I was with at the time, she was like, which we'll get into that if we want to. And she was like, I don't like that place and yada, yada. She was very controlling and taught me a lot about life, and ironically. And so I ended up going to visit a school in St. Louis. I loved it. And I ended up moving to St. Louis after my undergrad in Kentucky. And I'm originally from Tennessee. I was born and raised in Nashville. And so I went to school. That way, where I remember telling my mom and dad, hey, I'm going to do this. And they just started crying because my mom didn't want me to leave because she was going to lose her boy. Right. She was going to lose her connection that she had built over time because my father wasn't around. So it's like and this is deep in the psyche world where it talks about this, like the son being viewed as the shortcomings of the father. And that was very much my experience. And so I always resisted that because I felt that, and I didn't really realize that until later on in life. Every time I had a release, there was always it was so hard to detach every time. So I would always have this gut inner authority, and they would like resist out of fear, not out of even support of fear. It's a difference, right? And so that's really how I made decisions. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea why I was there. I just knew that I had to be there. I made up this, Ponzi scheme plan that I was going to like become a tutor, and I didn't do any of that shit. I just went to school because I felt that's where I had to be. And later on in my first year, I found out why I was there. So I like to say I went into life with my ass first, and then I played catch up with my head and my brain, because I lead from the bottom. I lead from my gut. So I'm like leading that way. So it doesn't seem very smart or logical now that I'm saying this out loud, and that people may hearing this, but at the same time, it's divine in nature, because it's on the opposite side. There's this analysis by paralysis, which I didn't spend a lot of time there. I would just go and act and pick up the pieces later.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that even you kind of pause and say like, well, now that I'm saying this right now, it doesn't like sound very smart, but to me that feels representative of what we expect as a society. Like, well, we expect decisions to be smart. We expect them to be well thought out. We expect them to be logical. At least that's been a lot of my experience, and I talk about it often on the show. But I am in the process of trying to make decisions more by feeling and less by thinking, and having to feel like I have all of it mapped out and I know exactly what's going to happen, and I feel like it's smart and right and all of these things. I've always thought by logic. So it's even interesting, someone who is very intuitive in the way that you have made decisions based on feeling, even kind of stopping yourself there and being like, well, it doesn't sound very smart, because I feel like there's just that Is it a pressure that we have to be able to articulate our decisions and we have to sound smart, and that's important for some reason?
I do. I think that we've become so smart in the formation of our neocortex and our prefrontal lobe, which is just your frontal lobe. That's where we thrive. That's what separates us from our friends and our ancestors, the apes. That's what separates us. It's just this aspect. And so we've become so smart that we feel, especially in the big city life that I come from, that you feel you have to educate yourself in order to stand up for your own inner authority. And you have to do it in the form of research and data says this and yada, yada, yada. You have to defend yourself for what you really innately, your own innate inclination, where you have a gut feeling and you don't know why. You see what I'm getting at? Where there's, where back when it used to be just respond, right? You have an innate inclination. I'm not going to let my mind get in the way. I'm just going to respond. So there's a mentor of mine that says, literally get your frontal lobe out of the way. Just get your frontal lobe out of the way. It's not that complicated. Just make a decision, where it's like, well, what does the research say? What does the data say? It's like, well, if you really want to talk about research, I talk a lot about light because light has impacted a lot of my life in the form of sunlight and fine-tuning my internal light environment home, and especially light on the phone, where all studies that are done indoors have never accounted for artificial light, not one. So can the studies actually be, can they actually have validity? I'm going to go with no, because they didn't account for the artificial light above you, which affects all things. So that's just a little tidbit. That's my jab. That's my jab at ivory towers. But
tell me more about light.
Oh, let's go. Okay. So in the beginning, right, there was what? There was darkness, and then there was light created. After there was light, there was nature. After nature, there was man. So everything created after light is in direct response to light. So of course, you see that in plants with this act of photosynthesis. You see that in us and mammals. We don't elicit photosynthesis, but we do it similarly, and it goes through the blood and into the liver. And it literally, if you look up the actual same cellular matrix of photosynthesis and what we do, it's almost the exact same. It's pretty crazy. So that's how we respond to life. So there's this concept of charge where our bodies are literally light. So you have light inside of you, and the sun, we're able to absorb light into our bodies via this chemical called melanin in our skin. So people who have more melanin are going to be darker. People who have lighter skin are going to have less melanin. So the sun is literally how we live our lives. It's how the cycles in our bodies know when to operate. So for example, the modern man's dilemma, which we talk about all the time, you spend your life inside out of the sun. So you don't know what time it is. You tell time by being in the sun. You tell body time. Okay. You know when to sleep. You know when to do the TCA cycle. You know when to go through all of the cycles at night by what you do during the day and how much light you get. So that's what I mean by charge. We're like a battery, and the sun fills our battery during the day by getting the sun on our skin and in our eyes. Because then once it goes into our eyes, it goes into our brain, then it goes into our organs, it goes into our gut, and it's like a clock. So the sun helps us tell time, so that way we know how to function. And that's like the simplest way I can put it there. So it's all about, and another concept of that would be circadian rhythm. A lot of people know what circadian rhythm is. You have a night, or you have a day and a night cycle. And depending on your light environment will depend on how well your circadian clock or your circadian rhythm functions. So for example, if it's 8 o'clock at night, you don't want the inside of your home to be lit up like a Christmas tree because it's dark outside. And remember, we are in response to nature and we are in response to light. We are nature, we are light, right? So if you're going against, this is what I mean by getting your frontal lobe out of the way. It can be very simple. Just get in alignment with your environment outside of your house, connect your internal environment in your home connected to what's outside. So that means like getting more red lights. That means, you see what you kind of get what I'm saying? So
yeah, I mean, tell me more about, from a practical standpoint, what does this actually look like on a daily basis?
So when the sun is at its arc at sunset and sunrise, it emits more red light. So red light is what helps our mitochondria, which mitochondria is generally known as the powerhouse of the cell. It's actually what drives gene function. And this is all from the work of a mentor of mine, Jack Cruz, who had he calls like sitting at the foot of the David moment, and had this big awakening and into his work. And I've applied a lot of his work to my life and seen the results that he talks about. And so for me, it's all about connecting back to nature. So at the arc, it emits more red light, which allows our mitochondria to recycle its engine, because it's just an engine. And the mitochondria actually drives gene function. It actually drives all of our functions from a product called ATP. So it's all about energy. So it drives everything. It's like the Atlas photo of the guy holding up the world. That guy is our mitochondria. Yeah, it's like holding it up. And so that's really interesting stuff, because I grew up, learning about genetics, and now later on, epigenetics of, oh, you just got bad genes, or you just got these genes or that genes. Well, mitochondria turn on different genes. They are responsible for how genes express. So it's just another layer lower, which is really interesting work, because, genetics play into so many things, right? And it can, that work needs to be looked at more, which it is through other practitioners that have worked with Jack. So, as it's arcing, it's more red. So practically in your home, you can have, if you're an early riser, right, have more red lamps. If you're going to wake up at 5, like this morning, I woke up to go surf at like 5. I cut the red on, right? And at night, our house is red like a Christmas tree, because I am matching my environment. I'm matching where the sun is at, and it's going to have more red at its arcs here, where when it's at its peak, it's more full spectrum, which is also useful to be out in. So that's very practical. So when it's dark outside, you want your home to be equally as dark. Of course, you can have candles. Of course, you don't need, like, you can be crazy and have it be pitch black and run into a bunch of stuff, but go as extreme as you want. And I've actually worked with a guy in Alaska, and what's interesting, so in winter, is it like there's more light in the winter, or there's more darkness in the winter? It's probably more darkness, right?
More darkness. Yeah. It's we'll have our shortest day. We'll have only like 4 or 5 hours of light.
Wow. That is crazy. Yeah, because it's like the 65th latitude, or it's like really high latitude. Like, you should look up the latitude of Alaska. I think it's like 60 something. So for you, that's where getting out in the light is going to be so important for you, because you're going to have so much darkness. And I know we're not here to fully talk about you. At the same time, try it on. Just have a blast with it. Be playful, where this concept of light really plays into a lot of my work, especially with the blue light screens. Like, I have a red filter on my screen right now that I keep on, because it cuts out the blue, where the blue is what is addictive, because it's right. Remember I said light is a full spectrum. It's a full piece of the full pie. Well, think of pumpkin pie. I love pumpkin pie. And you take out a small sliver of that, and think of that as the artificial light that's in our phones, where if anything in light is taken out of the context and used, it becomes pathological. It becomes addictive, all to the dopamine circuits. So, yeah.
So, I mean, for people, we don't have to use my exact situation, but we are coming up on winter for a lot of people living around the world. There's just going to be less natural daylight happening. It's going to be pretty extreme in my case, but for a lot of people, that's going to be happening. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is prioritize getting outside when it is
Absolutely.
daylight. When it's not going to be daylight, prioritize using things like red light. Use blockers on your phone to try to filter out some of that blue light that comes from technology and devices. Any other tips for people as we approach winter and we might just have less daylight?
Yeah, so really this is all about internal light production and being thermodynamically efficient. Where how do we become more thermodynamically efficient as batteries? Well, do batteries work better in the heat or the cold?
Heat.
Cold.
Although not too cold, because I'm thinking of my van batteries, because if it gets down to freezing, then I have to take them out of the cold. So not too cold.
Not too cold, of course, but they work better in the cold.
Okay.
So when in the winter, a great way to actually produce more light inside of you is to take cold showers. You can do a cold plunge if you want. However, there's so much that world has become insanely derivative because it's, people see that, and if they're coming from this way of extremism, they're like, oh my God, I gotta like do this thing, take all these ice baths every day for me to be healthy. It's like, no, dude, you only have to be 20 degrees off of your thermal body temperature to actually get a hormonal response. So think about it. We burn at 98 degrees. So you could 78, 70 degrees or so is perfectly fine. And that's like, your water temperature. However, in the winter, the shower temperature is quite chilly. So it gives you that shock. It gives you that response. What else does it teach you from a psyche perspective? That you can actually withstand discomfort. So you're choosing this aspect of discomfort in your life to actually be calm within the chaos. So it's quite profound of a practice that I practiced a lot in the cold. However, like the water here, it's like, it's so hot here today. And it's been so hot where the cold water is actually warm because it's so hot. So that's one way. Really, maximizing your red light, your red light that you can get. So there's different companies that have like different red light lamps you can put onto your body and do that. One that I use is called EMR Tech. That's another way. Breath work is a great way to meditation, of course. All these just ways of cooling the system and also increasing your dopamine regeneration, because it gets cloudy. And then we start to feel all of our feelings. Everything comes up. What do most people do? They go to their adult pacifiers, which is their phone, and they avoid. And they go there from fear. And, that's like at the top of the roller coaster, right? I used to go to Cedar Point as a kid, if you know where that is. And then you're looking at your phone, and then before you know it, it's like you see some erotic imagery, and then here you go. And then you're like, doing the thing, you're riding the roller coaster. And because that was always my experience, and it would always come up during winter. All of my skin symptoms would come up during winter that were associated with my porn usage, that were associated with my lack of light. All would happen during those deep, dark times, because the darkness mirrors the darkness that we are actually feeling on the inside, that we actually need to explore. And is actually one of the best times to explore it. If you actually give yourself the permission. And one of my friends, I love him as a true, genuine man. He's like a father to me, and he's only like 10 years older than me. And that's who I would spend my winters with. And we would do our saunas, we would do our cold plunges, and he would just speak life into me without saying a word. He would impart so much of his fatherly knowledge and wisdom without even speaking to me, because that's what I always yearned as a kid when I didn't have that father figure around. And interesting enough, with kids and fathers, and then I'll get back to what I was talking about. With kids and fathers, kids need to see their fathers doing what they're doing, what they do for work specifically. And do we see that a lot these days? Absolutely not. No. Most people have like Most dads have like my dad had a, pretty much an industrial complex job. I had no idea what the hell he did. And I still kind of like don't know. And what happens if a son doesn't know what their father does? It allows for this place and this act of like autosuggestion or assumption to take over. Whereas sons and fathers used to spend every day together, like I spend now with my daughter. Spend every day making bows and arrows or hunting game or plowing the fields or imparting that wisdom, that mana, that life from the boy being able to see the image of the father, because the boy needs to portray the image of the father as not perfect, but something that you aspire to be. Where I remember I used to say like, man, I hate my dad. I don't want to yada, yada, yada. Cause I was so angry, So all the way back to winter, it's like, that's what I had to go back and explore is my point, to get back to that. And so body wise, like all my work is like psychology and biology just merged. And the more time that I have together, the more men I work with, the more it gets refined. So it's from a winter's perspective, taking the psyche and exploring your shadow, right? And all the while having a body experience too.
I wanted to talk to you more about addiction in particular, because it's something you talk a lot about. It's a lot of your work, if anywhere from alcohol, pornography, gambling, the many, blue light, phones, all of those things can be addictive, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you kind of mentioned some of it, but tell me more about what you believe is sort of some of the foundation of some of these addictions. And I wanted to ask you a how question again about how do we start changing some of those patterns. But I guess let's just start with understanding from your perspective, what is actually happening within us when we're leaning on these addictions?
Well, what I feel is that all aspects of choosing to compensate outside of you always start from fear. It starts from fear, and then you choose something else to avoid. So for me, it was always, I had this fear around resources. I had this fear around my territory. I never felt safe. And so I always felt like I needed more and more and more and more and more to be safe. I always needed more money. So I always tried to make money, which led to me wanting to gamble. I always had something missing in my life, this empty hole. And so I would go to my coping mechanisms, my phone. All the while it was in the house. So the field was strong with it. And from fear to then angry, horny, right? Because if you look on angry and horny are synonymous, which we can get into that. So if you look on how we evolve emotionally through our intelligence, it goes fear, it goes up to desire, then it goes up to angry, then it goes up to neutrality. And for me, the leap is from neutrality to willingness. That's why I talk about willingness a lot, and acceptance. So if you look at it on like a linear scale from bottom to top, you start at fear. You don't start at shame, you end at shame. You're afraid of something that you don't want to explore. You then go to desire. I'm going to go on Instagram and desire someone else's life because I feel like a POS. And then I'm going to see something. And then it's going to allow you to go down to the tunnel where within you, you know that you're there for bad intentions, right? And then you go into it. So really, I started to go back and I started to dissect. Really, I wrote a whole autobiography of my life. I connected the patterns of what I went through and how I was expressing them, and then what I needed to do to change that. So for me, it always circled back to, okay, there's something about this damn light thing. There's something about it, because every time it's always with my phone. And all throughout my childhood, I lived my life on my phone. I was addicted to my phone. Ask any of my friends, I was glued. I was just like this succubus of information, had to know everything. And so I did an experiment on myself. When I was like in like really like a couple months of recovery, you would say, I was like, all right, I'm gonna do an experiment. So I put my red screen on my phone, put my red glasses on, and then I pulled up porn. I was like, I'm gonna see how I feel. I'm gonna see how this feels in my body. It almost like makes me emotional because I didn't get the buzz. I didn't feel the same feelings that I felt without it. I actually wanted to take the glasses off to then actually observe it. What did I actually do? I put a veil in between my own conscious mind and between what I was actually doing. I was able to zoom out and see, dude, this is just two people having sex on a phone. Why would somebody watch this? And it imprinted that into my foundation. I was like, okay, there is something to this light thing. So then I started to study more Jack. I got, there's a whole daylight computer that cuts out the blue light, where there's this work of connecting blue light to autism. Like, dude, this is a whole movement that is really about to shake some shit up in our world, where a lot of people don't. It's going to shake a lot of things up for people as regarding blue light and how toxic that it is. And I related it all to me and my bodily experience and my psyche experience. So I have boundaries with my phone. I always have my red screen on, always take my glasses with me. Not from a place of fear, from a place of it's what I have to do to be in this world that we have, So to really, we're about to get some rain. Let me go inside. For me, we've got editing skills, so we will lovely edit this out.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I don't anyway, just because, this is just the reality of life.
There we go.
Mitchell was outside and it was going to rain, so he's going inside. That's part of how it goes.
There we go. It's part of life, man. It's how we be. There we go. So I did that experiment. I started to really encompass myself in nature. And I really started to, most importantly, dive deep back into my childhood. And like I said, why things happened the way that they did. So now, how do I take this and apply it? Well, one, you have to go deep into your shadow. You have to go deep into those aspects of your unconscious that you have been choosing to avoid, that are continuing this cyclical nature. So I have a unique way of going about that in all of my containers. So I merge. I like to think of it as a psyche top-down clean out to actually having a bottom-up experience in life, basically. And so I merge a lot of Jung's work, Robert Moore's work, Bly's work with Jack's work, with the work of my mentor, and then my life all together. That is really circled around nature and returning back to that. And its principles. So and really to answer your question, how do we make these changes? Well, one, everybody's got to be willing, because it's not sexy work. It's not, you're not going to see it down in Times Square. You're going to see all the opposite, because they as in people with really great amounts of money that market a lot of their stuff. They actually use a lot of the shadow aspects of the psyche to actually what's the word I'm looking for? Connect. And what's the word? It's right here on my tongue. To actually we'll just use connect. To actually connect to that aspect of men, using plus the blue light to actually make them more controllable, because it's all about your dopamine track and circuit, because that's how you feel and experience excitement in life. So let's go there. So what is dopamine? Dopamine is your pleasure hormone. That's what makes you feel excitement. That's what makes that's what makes you feel joy. It's how you experience satisfaction. And the brain is actually wired as a braking system for this aspect of this area. Now, would you believe me if the same part of the brain that is affected by erotic imagery is affected by monetary gain? It's the same. Just on the there's a term called anterior, which means front. And then there's a term called posterior, which means back. Just on the anterior and posterior aspect of the same place is what affects erotic imagery and monetary gain. So let's think about casinos. Okay. You've got scantily clad women, dopamine. You've got slot machines, blue light, more dopamine. You've got booze is going to inhibit or inhibition the aspect of your braking system to where you cut the brake line to actually just have this fuck it mentality.
Yeah.
It's all centered around control. So if you can interfere with the brain, you can interfere with the whole being. And that's how it's done. And that's how a lot of things are done in our culture. Take sports, I'm going deep now. Take sports, take all aspects of that pleasure center, and that's how it's done. And so they're like, people are really good at their job, So it's like, I chose to exit myself from that place. And as my friend Sam would say, I was tired of hiding in culture. And now we're creating our new culture, just creating our own culture, creating our own myths and places, things.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of that in your mind comes down to taking back control, essentially kind of removing yourself out of these very specifically designed systems that are meant to tap into different parts of our biology and psychology, taking back control. I think of that literal putting on the red glasses, and it's like, changing what you actually see. It's taking back some sort of control and making a real move in some ways to do something differently. But this idea of taking back control is like the foundation of, I guess, what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm. It's taking back control, realizing that you have no control. So you could also term that as, I'm taking back responsibility for my life and how I choose to show up, how I choose to show up as a man, and how I deduct, because life is about deducting rather than adding anything. You always have to deduct something from your life before you ever add a thing. Life is based in deductive reasoning. Because take away the things that aren't serving you, and you're actually going to experience more resolution and remedy than if you ever added a new workout, added a new diet, or yada, yada, yada. Where, again, you're talking about the glasses. So we have these lenses on our eyes, right? We have the iris, we have the cornea, we have all these things. Light enters our eyes. And if the lenses on our eyes are misshapen, it changes the way that light enters our bodies. Do you know that there is a, they call it a disease, but there is a symptom for people that watch too much blue light. And it's where the lens of the eye becomes malformed. It becomes misshapen. It causes a lot of issues. Because remember, back to my first topic, my first part here, light is how we tell time biologically. So for me, and I know a guy who has that. I actually spoke to him on Instagram Live. For me, that stamped the effect even more of, wow, okay, there's something about this light thing. There's something about this and pornography, because he's a porn coach. He watched porn for so many years. And where really the basis of my work is, I'm trying to get you back into actually responding from your own internal environment, like we started with. What's that called? Instincts. Pornography takes away your instincts. It takes away your ability to create, takes away your ability to exist. You turn into a zombie, basically. You take all of your charge and light and you let it go, and you just become complacent. You don't know what is going on in your environment. And all this is seen in the brain. And so that's how I live my life. I live my life. I live my life to serve everyone else and to put myself last, because I cared immensely what everyone thought. And I'm saying this because there's so many people like that out there. And I want, first of all, to let you know that you're not alone. Second of all, is that there's real remedy, because I know what you feel inside you, that you actually don't want to be up at, 12 a.m. drinking a beer. You actually have deeper dreams within you, but I was so addicted to my external source of approval being from my friends. And so in that, I put myself last. And as a man, if you put yourself last, and if you have a wife and kids, you're also putting them last too. Because if you follow the creation story, man was created first before woman, and not in any way sort of that man is better than woman. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that man has the responsibility. That's why I talk about responsibility, to guide and support everything else after it. All life after man is in responsive to man. That's why, who's the most important role in the family? The father. Of course, the mother has different aspects of survival, yes. When it comes from a long-term perspective, you can trace so many pathological things back to this one question: was the father present? And you'll get your answer. Think of all the jail cells that we could free if a father was present. Think of all the addicts on the street that we could clear if a father was present. That's my real purpose here, to be a present man. Because if you just show up, just like, dude, that saying in school, show up and you'll get a C. It's the same thing. Just show up. Like, So that's really what I'm about, because I live the opposite. I live the dark, and now I'm using the dark, as Robert Bly would say. I ate my shadow, and now I use it. I use it, which is a abstract concept, but
I like it though, as far as, we don't have to run away from the dark and the darkness. We can actually use it. It can be beneficial to us in some ways. It's like we need it. We can benefit from it. I like that saying, use the darkness.
Use it. Why do you think that in all the movies, so many people resonate with the darkness more than the actual heroes? Because that's it. That's the archetypal journey. That's it. It's right there in front of you. Think of like Darth Vader, of course, the dark side of the Force. So many. The Joker. I always resonated with Joker. Seeing him actually as some sort of hero, in an essence, where he's the agent of chaos. Well, what really is chaos? Chaos is love. Now he does it in a pathological way, yes, but at its core, truthful, if he was the light version of that, he would be the agent of love. So that's why a lot of men fear love, because it's chaotic. They can't control it. Oh man, I got to fight with my partner because I can't control this. So then I recluse because I'm afraid I'm going to fragment this love. I'm afraid I'm going to break it and I'm going to be back in shame. So I'm just going to self-preserve and then go to something that I can control. Remember what I said about porn? It's fragmented love. If it's fragmented, you can control it. That's why all men go to it, because they can control it. They can pick any ethnicity, any position, anything that they want right then and there. That's why it's so pathological, because it goes against our entire being of love. And I'm here to bring love to the world. That's all in my design. So if my mentor, Michelle, she said, she, I wasn't even in her mentorship because of pornography. It just kind of came out that way. I was in her mentorship for a totally entirely different reason, right? It's the story of my life. I show up for why I think I'm there, and then I actually learned why I'm there.
Yeah.
And she was like, you've been choosing the subvert instead of the real thing. And I was like, got it. That's all I needed. The subvert. You've been choosing the secondary because I could control it. Where most men aren't afraid of their darkness. They're afraid of how powerful they really are. They're afraid of the light. And that's a quote. It's like, I can't remember who said that, but it's not our darkness that whatever. I'm not even going to attempt to butcher it, but
I know the quote. Yeah.
yeah, you know it. And for me, I was tired of running. I was tired of being sick and tired, and that's the energy that I bring to all my men, and even couples too. I mean, Hazel and I work with married couples, and it's all about realizing that, hey, if two are one, then if one is affected, then the other is too. So it's about context. So there's a women's role in man's addiction, and it's not talked about. I've never heard of it, but I experienced it, and so that's a part of our work. And it was really impactful for me, and it like can trigger a lot of people. But that's what I'm here. I'm a heretic too. So you're like, what is it? What's the role?
Well, I am curious. I mean, as that might have to be a part two.
Yeah.
Teaser for next time. I'm just curious about, in environment and the places that we find ourselves living. I'm curious about the story. How does a guy born in Tennessee, in Nashville, going to be a chiropractor, end up living in Puerto Rico?
Let's see. How did I get here? How did I get to Puerto Rico? Well, born in Nashville, went to St. Louis for school. I drove 8.5 hours to a seminar in Atlanta. It was this mega seminar where all my friends were at, big energy. And that's where I met my wife. Haishla is her name. And we had this big spark together. And she's from Puerto Rico. She's from here. So fast forward, we start dating. She ends up moving to Nashville with me. Within a couple months of us dating, we started practice together. 4 years go by. Really, right around like 3 years or so, we had visited the island a couple times, and I was like, man, we got to go there. Like, I just don't know why, but see, story of my life. I don't know why, but I'm feeling this thing, and it's like taking me over. We got to go. So we went about 5 times, and every time she was like, I don't know, it's so corrupt, and all the negative things that she was seeing. And through our mentorship, our mentor, Michelle, blessed woman, queen, she really brought out of us both, specifically her, and Haishla made this decision and had this connection herself through her guidance of, I do need to go back. Because you know why? She was running. She was a collegiate runner in college. She's always been a runner because she was always running from something. And she had that big, profound revelation. And she's like, okay, we got to go. So we sold everything, sold all of our cars, sold everything we had, tried to sell the business. The business didn't sell, ended up selling all of our equity in the business. I was just ready to go. And before we left, we still had a bunch of stuff. I just started giving stuff away. I was like, just take my bike, take my tools. I'm just done. I'm done. I can't live in the rat race anymore. It's going to kill me. And Haishla felt the same way. Our daughter was not thriving. We were not thriving at all. I was just drained. I had bags under my eyes all the time. I was tired. I was just deep in my addiction. I knew it was time to go. The same feeling, how do you know when the cookies are done? One of my mentors told me that. He's like, how do you know when the cookies are done? You just feel it. You just know, And so we went and we lived with the in-laws for about 3 months. And that was really the catalyst of our whole work. It was living with them for 3 months, where we lived with them due to my gambling addiction. Okay. Where I tried to make a quick buck with a lot of the money that we had reserved, and I lost it. We've been to hell. That's why I speak this way about shadow, because there was no way around it. I had to go through with it. I didn't have to become it, but I had to face myself. And, I remember she looked at me and we had a little money left over and she trusted me. This is why I love her so much. She looked at me and she believed in me. She's like, look, we've got whatever money we have left. She's like, I know you're going to make it back. And I lost it.
Oh man.
I lost it. And so what's funny is I sat with that, and we lived with the in-laws for 3 months, and that was like our think tank, right? We didn't have any it was my time to fully let go. I finally let go of control, where due to my fear of control, that's why I was always trying to search for more and more and more and more and more in my life, always. And I finally stopped searching for more. I was finally satisfied with my life. I accepted what I had. She faced the parts of herself and her patterns through her mom and grandmother. I faced mine through actually her grandfather. We had a big combustion, big energy explosion there. We actually were asked to leave due to me because I stood up for my family, because I didn't like how people were being treated. And we were kicked out of the clan, where that's a big part of the culture here. Either like you do what we tell you, or like see you later, even if you're family, you know. And so we took another leap, took another big leap. And I remember we left the house, going to the area right around where we are now, and we didn't even know we had the house yet. We technically had nowhere to live, and we were driving to the town that we were supposed to get this house, and we ended up getting the house on like divine faith. Got the house, and we lived there for 5 months. And then the beautiful door opened up to the house that we're in now, and the place that we've actually wanted to be, where our heart has been. So, and now we are building our bones, right? We are building our foundation. We're strong. We have the capacity now, because I went through all that shit. I had to feel like I had to know what it was to be broke in order to actually feel wealth. That's the story of my life that I've been avoiding. Like, I was avoiding my rock bottom, and I kept hitting a rock bottom over and over and over until boom. Okay, I get it now. My mentor was like, Mitchell, you can learn things the easy way. Back to that. You can learn things the easy way. And it clicked for me. I was like, dude, I can just live by my design, respond how I'm supposed to respond, and it happens. And it does. That's why I say it can be that easy. It can be. Where I talked to a friend of mine today, he's like, man, I'm grinding. I'm like, why? Do you know when you're grinding, like if you're grinding, think of two hard surfaces grinding together. What happens? Particles.
Dull.
Yeah, they get dull. They get smaller, right? So where at some point in time, there's going to be nothing left. Where when you're grinding, you're creating more constriction, and actually you're closing off all the magnetism that's actually trying to find you. That's just there for you all along. So that seems esoteric in a sense, and that you have to have belief, but there is an interview between this guy and Osho, and Osho gets a lot of bad rep for the Netflix documentary that is about him. Where a man asked Osho, he was like, do you believe in God? And Osho was like, no. And the man was like perplexed. And he's like, but you're like a spiritual teacher. Like, what do you mean? He's like, what does a belief have to do with anything? He's like, I know that God is real. That's all there is. I know. And if you know, you know. And so I had to know what that felt like for me in order to actually feel my light, feel my power, in order to really build a life out of capacity, build a life out of alignment, build a life out of congruency, out of integrity, instead of just copying everyone else. Like, I'm me, I've accepted who I am, and that's why I speak this way.
It's a beautiful story. I mean, it just kind of, I think for me, for anyone listening, highlights, I guess, what's possible, especially when you go through difficult moments. I've been through some of my own, and I'm sure someone listening has been through theirs too, that there can be beautiful things, on the other side of that. And I guess that's one of my main takeaways of many that I take from this conversation. I'll be going and looking into how I can add some more red light into my environment here so I can make it through the Alaskan winter. But I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you being here and sharing your story and perspectives. I just think that's one of the most powerful things as human beings that we can do, is to share and to hear other people's stories. And I find it valuable, and I trust other people will as well. So thank you.
Dude, you're very welcome. We all have stories. It's all about when we choose to tell them or not.
Hey, my friend, just want to say thanks again for tuning in to the episode this week. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mitchell. I know I sure did. If you liked it, if it made you think, like I promised it would in the beginning of the episode, maybe you'd share it with someone through text message or email or on social media. Spread conversations like this and share it with someone that you think might find it valuable. Thanks in advance. Thanks for being here this week, and I've got more episodes to share with you in the future. We'll see you then.